When two wealthy men walked into a small-town diner, no one expected the night to turn cruel. A young waitress became their target, mocked, shoved, and humiliated while everyone else looked away. But just as things were about to get worse, the door opened, and a retired SWAT officer stepped in, his loyal K-9 at his side. What happened next didn't just stop the bullying, it uncovered a truth darker than anyone imagined. Stay with this story, because you won't believe what came after. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe for more. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. A pale winter sun sagged behind the mountains, casting silver ridge beneath a curtain of drifting snow. Ethan Cole pushed open the frosted glass door of the old pine diner as Blaze, his German shepherd, padded in beside him with deliberate steps. At 60, Ethan carried the quiet heaviness of a man who had seen far too much and survived even more, his broad shoulders softened by age, yet still squared from years of tactical posture. His weathered face bore rugged lines carved by time, loss, and old injuries that refused to let him forget who he used to be. His hair, once coal black, had turned iron gray at the temples, cut short in a style rooted in discipline, and a faint shadow of stubble traced along his jaw, giving him a look both approachable and impenetrable. The old SWAT injury in his lower back always flared when the cold crept in, and today the cold seemed intent on reminding him of every painful memory he carried. Blaze, 4 years old, 95 pounds of muscle, alertness, and loyalty, moved with the assurance of a guardian, his thick winter coat mottled black and russet, bristling faintly as amber eyes scanned the diner with sharp, wordless intuition. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee, grilled onions, and the kind of warmth only old wood and older stories could provide. Ethan liked it here. Silence wasn't suspicious, and people let a man keep his ghosts. At a booth near the window sat Lila Hart, the waitress on shift, wiping down menus with hands that moved quicker than her tired expression suggested. At 23, she had a small, delicate build and soft features framed by pale brown hair tied in a loose ponytail that failed to hide her exhaustion. Pretty in a quiet, unassuming way, large hazel eyes, slender nose, skin slightly pale from sleepless nights. She wore a uniform hanging a little loose, evidence of skipped meals taken so her mother could eat instead. Ethan didn't know her well, but he recognized the look of someone carrying burdens meant for older shoulders, and something old inside him stirred. Blaze settled at Ethan's feet, but his ears tilted forward at the sound of loud laughter from the door. Even before Ethan turned, he felt the shift in the room like a tremor beneath the floorboards. 2 men entered, wealth announcing them before their names ever could. The first was Harold Knox, a local businessman known for flipping failing properties into gold mines, walking with the swagger of a man convinced everything he touched belonged to him. Late 50s, tall, thick around the middle yet still muscular in a vanity-fueled way, with slicked-back silver hair and a meticulously trimmed beard designed to project authority. His cold blue eyes scanned the diner, as if choosing which kingdom to conquer next. His son, Devin Knox, strutted beside him, a lean, dangerous kind of childish. About 25, wrapped in a designer winter coat and an expensive sweater that didn't fit the weather or the town. Blonde. Hair styled into an effortless mess that likely took effort, smooth jaw free from hardship, sharp cheekbones lending him a predatory youthfulness. But his narrow, entitled eyes were the real trouble, always searching for someone weaker to crush. Silver Ridge had learned to whisper his sins, and his father had learned to bury them. Ethan watched quietly. Men like that had patterns. He'd spent decades predicting them. Blaze, sensing Ethan's tightened breath, lifted his head and stared. Lila approached their table with a notebook and a trembling smile shaped by necessity, not warmth. "Good evening," she said softly. "What can I get for you both?" Harold didn't bother looking at her. "Coffee, hot, and wipe this table again. It's sticky." Devin smirked, leaning back with exaggerated satisfaction. Ethan recognized the posture. The young man was hunting for sport. Lila swallowed and wiped the table again, even though it was already clean, humiliation flickering through her expression like a shadow beneath a street lamp. When she straightened, Devin flicked a crumpled napkin to the floor. "You missed a spot." She knelt to pick it up. Blaze rumbled, more vibration than growl. Ethan's hand brushed the dog's shoulder, a silent order to wait, though something cold twisted within him. Memories of a boy beaten years ago, a case he arrived too late to stop. Lila returned with their coffees, but Harold barked, "Took you long enough." Devon reached forward and pinched her wrist lightly, smirking as she recoiled. "Relax, don't want you spilling anything on that sad little apron." Lila's voice tightened. "Please don't touch me." "Why?" Devon taunted. "You work for tips, don't you?" Harold chuckled. "Son, be nice. She looks like she's having a rough week." His tone made her suffering entertainment. Snow battered the windows, wind whistling like distant sirens, as Ethan felt the diner shrink around them. His jaw locked, tendons rising like cables beneath weathered skin. He had promised himself he wouldn't interfere unless someone was in real danger. But danger wore many faces. Lila tried stepping back, but Devon shoved his chair suddenly, catching her hip. She stumbled, dropped a coffee cup, and it shattered across the tiles. Devon rose. "Are you kidding me? Do you know how much these clothes cost?" I'm sorry," she whispered, bending to clean the hot spill with trembling hands. Devon's eyes brightened at the cruelty he could get away with. He shoved her shoulder, knocking her against the booth. "Pathetic!" Blaze stood, slow, tall, storm-like. Customers turned. Ethan rose too, restraint clashing with fury. Devon finally noticed. "What's your problem, old man?" Ethan didn't answer. He looked only at Lila. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though she wasn't. Harold stood next, adjusting his expensive coat. "Mind your business. My son didn't do anything wrong. She fell. These people always fall." Ethan's pulse slowed. A dangerous calm. Blaze inched forward, lips twitching above his teeth. Snow hammered the windows. The tension felt like a drum beating for war. Then Devon did what Ethan had dreaded. He grabbed Lila's forearm and jerked her upright. She gasped, wincing, trying to pull free. That was enough. Ethan stepped forward, voice low and carved from steel. "Let her go," Blaze growled, a warning rolling through the diner like distant thunder. The moment hung suspended. Snow outside swirling like restless spirits, heat inside rising like a brewing storm, and injustice poised like a blade ready to fall. Ethan, the man who had sworn he was done rescuing strangers, realized he was already crossing the space between them. Because heroes never retire. Not really. Devon Knox's fingers tightened around Lila's wrist, twisting with the smug confidence of someone who had never once been stopped in his life. She winced, breath catching in panic as he jerked her downward, forcing her to her knees on the cold tile floor. Her hazel eyes widened, not only with fear, but with shame, the kind that burrows deep and lingers for years. Devon smirked, savoring a cruelty he believed he fully controlled. Ethan Cole rose before he consciously decided to, the motion instinctive, smooth, silent, inevitable. His voice cut through the diner, low and sharpened like a blade long kept in reserve. "Enough," Blaze stepped forward with him, planting his broad frame between Lila and danger, thick fur rising along his spine as a subterranean growl vibrated through his chest. The shepherd's amber eyes locked onto Devon with a force that made even grown men reconsider their choices. Devon froze, startled by the sudden wall of muscle, teeth, and controlled fury. "Get that mutt back," he snapped, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his fear. Harold Knox stood now too, pushing his chair back with a scrape, chest puffed and posture set like a man preparing to command the universe itself. Ethan ignored him completely. His attention stayed on Devon, his stance squared, not aggressive, but authoritative in the quiet, deadly way of someone who used to break down doors for a living. "Let her go," Ethan said. No theatrics, no rise in tone, just a command. Devon tried to laugh, but bravado cracked under its own weight. "Or what? You think—" He didn't finish. Ethan moved with the terrifying efficiency of a man who had unlearned hesitation decades ago. His hand seized Devon's wrist, twisting it in a controlled arc that shut down resistance in a single fluid motion. Devon yelped, stumbling, as Ethan pivoted behind him and pressed a nerve cluster just firmly enough to teach respect. Gasps rippled through the diner. Blaze stood guard over Lila, tail stiff, teeth exposed but perfectly disciplined. "Get your hands off my son!" Harold roared, stepping forward. "You should worry less about my hands," Ethan replied coolly, not even glancing at him, and more about his behavior. Devin flailed weakly, but the technique held him like steel. Ethan wasn't injuring him, just proving a point in the way seasoned instructors once did for rookies too arrogant to understand consequences. Devin's breath turned shallow. His pride crumbled faster than his resistance. Lila scrambled back, breathing uneven. Ethan flicked his gaze to her. "You're all right," he murmured, tension softening for a moment. She nodded shakily, clutching her apron. Harold Knox, unaccustomed to being challenged, reddened beneath the lights, blotches of hostile crimson blooming across his neck. "This is assault," he snapped. "You'll regret this, both of you." Ethan released Devin with a measured shove. The younger man stumbled into the booth, clutching his wrist, cheeks burning. Blaze shifted forward again, positioning himself in front of Ethan, a loyal, unspoken shield. Harold whipped out his phone, jabbing at the screen. "I'm calling Sheriff Dalton," he announced loudly, making sure every witness heard. "And when he gets here, you're finished. Done." The name made several locals exchange uneasy glances. Sheriff Dalton, late 50s, thick-chested with thinning blonde hair and a sandy mustache, was known less for justice and more for bending to those with deep pockets. His failed dream of joining the state police had curdled over the years into bitterness disguised as authority. Harold Knox owned men like Dalton, bought them with favors and debt disguised as friendship. Ethan didn't flinch. His pulse stayed steady. His eyes swept the room in a slow, assessing arc, a tactical echo from another lifetime. The diner fell silent except for the hum of the old heating unit and the storm clawing at the windows. Harold puffed his chest. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Ethan replied. "A man who thinks money makes him untouchable." Harold's jaw flexed. "Dalton will be here in 5 minutes." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said. Blaze punctuated the statement with a low rumble, more declaration than threat. Lila forced herself upright, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling, "for stepping in." Ethan shook his head once. "No one should treat you that way." Her eyes shimmered with restrained emotion as she moved back to the counter. Another waitress, Margaret, a tall woman in her 40s with dark auburn hair and a neat bun and sharp green eyes, placed a reassuring hand on Lila's arm. "Sit a minute, sweetheart. Breathe." Margaret then shot Harold a withering glare. "You boys never learn." The door chimed as a man stomped inside, snow dusting his jacket. Frank Miller, a rugged logger in his early 40s with a thick dark beard and steady brown eyes. He paused, taking in the scene instantly. Frank didn't speak, but his silence carried weight. He stood near the door, watching. Harold's phone buzzed, his lips curled triumphantly. "Dalton's on his way," he declared. Blaze's muscles coiled beneath Ethan's hand. The shepherd sensed storms before they broke. "Easy," Ethan murmured, calming him with a firm touch. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows like nature itself, protested what was coming. Ethan shifted subtly, not aggressive, but ready. He knew how quickly things spiraled once corrupt authority arrived. The diner hung in a fragile stillness. Devin sulked and massaged his wrist, shooting venomous glares. Harold paced like a man preparing a victory speech. Lila wiped tears quietly. Blaze stood sentinel, breath fogging. Ethan wasn't afraid, just calculating. Sheriff Dalton wasn't coming for justice. He was coming to protect Harold Knox's pride, and pride was often more dangerous than violence. Outside, red and blue lights flickered through the snowfall as a county patrol truck rolled into the Old Pine parking lot. Trouble had arrived, and Ethan Cole knew violence rarely came in a single wave. It came in ripples, each darker than the last. Night had fallen heavily over Silver Ridge, the sky swallowed by clouds that carried snow like a threat. Ethan Cole tightened his scarf against the slicing winter wind as he walked alongside Lila Hart, guiding her toward the small wooden cabin she called home. Blaze trotted a few steps ahead, his breath forming white plumes, ears swiveling like living radar. The cold bit at exposed skin, turning the world silent except for the crunch of boots on packed snow. Lila hugged her worn wool coat close to her chest, the faded sleeves whispering stories of too many winters and too little warmth. Her light brown hair, loosened from its ponytail, whipped across her cheeks in the wind. She looked thin, too thin, exhaustion clinging to her posture like a second shadow. She reminded Ethan of people he'd escorted out of crime scenes long ago, those who survived not by strength, but by refusing to collapse. "You didn't have to walk me home," she said, voice trembling slightly. "You've already done too much today." Ethan shook his head. "You shouldn't be out alone tonight." He didn't say the rest, but Harold Knox's threat followed them like a second set of footsteps. The path curled deeper into a forest of tall, snow-laden pines, their branches drooping like bowed sentries. Thin slivers of moonlight slipped through breaks in the clouds, casting fleeting silver onto the frozen ground. Blaze paused once, nose raised, muscles tensing, not alarm, but uncertainty. "Easy," Ethan murmured. They pressed on. The wind rose and fell, its mournful howls scraping across Lila's nerves. "Do you think Sheriff Dalton will actually try something?" she asked. "Not Dalton," Ethan replied. "Knox. He's the type who never forgets when someone bruises his ego." He had met men like Harold Knox all his life, men who mistook money for invincibility, cruelty for power, and fear for loyalty. As they reached a narrow wooden bridge spanning a frozen creek, Blaze froze. His body stiffened, tail lowered, and a deep rumble vibrated through his chest. Ethan's instincts lit up like sparks on dry tinder. He gripped Lila's arm, gently but firmly. "Behind me." Her breath hitched. "What is it?" Shadows peeled themselves from the tree line. 4 figures stepped into the faint moonlight, tall, broad-shouldered men in dark winter parkas, thick gloves, and black ski masks that concealed everything but their eyes. Frost clung to their clothing like they had been waiting for this moment. Lila gasped. "Oh, God!" Ethan stepped forward, shifting to place Lila partly behind him. Blaze positioned himself at Ethan's left flank, his hackles rising line by line, teeth flashing in the dimness. One of the masked men spoke, his voice rough, threaded with a smoker's rasp and a slight slur. Mid-30s, thick build, someone used to intimidating others through presence alone. Another, shorter and leaner, fidgeted nervously beside him, breath fogging. Quickly, anxious, inexperienced. The third man moved with an irregular gait, long arms and a crooked spine suggesting old injury. The fourth stood in the back, tall, lanky, too still. Both control and intent hid behind that silence. Ethan didn't speak. He let the stillness sharpen around them, assessing terrain, angles, escape routes, Lila's breathing, Blaze's posture. The leader chuckled darkly. "We're not here for you. Well, not just you." He pointed at Blaze. "Boss wants the dog, says a shepherd like that is worth good money. Maybe get him trained proper." Lila clapped a trembling hand over her mouth. "No!" Blaze's growl deepened, ancient thunder rolling through his chest. Ethan's jaw locked. "You're not touching the dog." The leader shrugged. "Harold Knox says otherwise." So Harold had wasted no time. Cowards never did. They struck hardest when their pride bled. 2 masked men stepped forward at a silent command. Lila's voice quivered. "Ethan." "When I say run," he whispered, "you go, don't look back." "But do it." The attackers lunged. Blaze exploded forward first, a muscular blur slicing through the snow. He slammed into the smaller, nervous attacker, knocking him flat. The man shrieked as Blaze pinned him, paws digging into his jacket, jaws bared inches from his throat. The second attacker swung a metal pipe at Ethan. Ethan sidestepped, not youthful quickness, but precise, practiced efficiency. The pipe clipped his shoulder, sending a flare of old pain through scarred muscle, but Ethan turned that momentum against the attacker, twisting his arm sharply until a sickening crack echoed across the snow. The man screamed and dropped. The lanky man at the back moved next, low, smooth, predatory. He aimed for Ethan's legs, but Blaze launched off the pinned attacker and intercepted, snapping and snarling with ferocious intent. The man stumbled back, startled. Only the leader remained unshaken. He drew a long hunting knife, its blade catching a sliver of moonlight. "Should have stayed out of it, old man." Ethan didn't answer. He stepped in, pain burning through his shoulder but focus razor sharp. The leader charged. Ethan intercepted his wrist, slamming his forearm onto a pressure point near the elbow. The knife fell into the snow with a muffled thud. The leader swung wild with his free hand. Ethan absorbed the hit, then delivered a controlled strike to the throat, enough to collapse the fight, not end a life. The man dropped, gasping. Snow swirled violently as Ethan regrouped beside Lila, Blaze circling protectively. The attackers, groaning or panicked, retreated into the trees, stumbling through the darkness. Blaze stayed alert, daring any of them to return. Leela clutched Ethan's arm, voice breaking. "You saved us. You saved Blaze." Ethan exhaled slowly, adrenaline ebbing but tension coiled tight beneath his ribs. "We're not done yet." Blaze pawed at something buried in the snow. A phone, dropped by the lanky attacker. Its cracked screen glowed faintly. Ethan lifted it, turning it in his gloved hand. A message shone across the cracked glass. From H. Knox. "Make sure the old man learns his place. Bring the dog. No loose ends." Ethan stared at the words, jaw tightening as cold certainty settled over him. Harold Knox had declared war, and wars like his never stayed in the shadows for long. Morning arrived pale and brittle, a thin winter light spreading across Silver Ridge as if afraid to touch the frozen ground. Ethan Cole hadn't slept much. His shoulder throbbed from the ambush, and his mind churned with the weight of Knox's escalation. Blaze sensed his unrest and paced the cabin early, nails clicking softly on the wooden floor, occasionally nudging Ethan's leg with a low, rumbling concern. The shepherd never asked questions. His loyalty spoke through quiet presence. By the time Ethan stepped outside, the cold hit him with a sharp bite. Snow drifted in slow layers, gathering on the branches of pine trees that bowed like tired sentinels. He zipped his weathered parka, jaw tightening as he mentally replayed the ambush from the night before. Knox had crossed a line, a serious one, and men like Harold Knox never stopped at one strike. Ethan was still contemplating his next move when his phone buzzed. The caller was Margaret from the Old Pine Diner. Her voice came rushed, panicked. "Ethan, you need to get to Lila's. Something happened." He didn't ask questions. "I'm on my way." Blaze hopped into the truck without being told, his breath fogging the interior glass. The drive toward the outskirts of Silver Ridge took them over slushy roads coated with ice and wind-carved ridges of snow. The small settlement where Lila lived stood at the edge of the forest, a scattering of aging cabins built decades ago, now creaking beneath the relentless winter. When Ethan parked and stepped out, he saw Lila standing on her front porch, if one could call the thin, sagging platform a porch. Her hands were wrapped around a crumpled envelope, her face pale as frost. Her coat was dusted white from falling snow, and exhaustion etched deeper into her soft features. Blaze approached her first, brushing against her legs, offering warmth the way only a dog could. Lila let out a shaky exhale and knelt briefly, fingers curling into his thick fur as though anchoring herself. "Ethan," her voice cracked. I don't know what to do." He stepped closer. "Tell me what happened." She handed him the letter. The paper was damp at the corners, snow or tears, he couldn't tell. On it was the landlord's name, Gerald Crane. Crane was a man in his late 60s, tall but stooped, his thin body usually wrapped in a drab brown overcoat that clung like a second skin. His salt-white hair sat flat against his head, deep wrinkles cutting sharply across his forehead from decades of frowning at debts, tenants, and life in general. Gerald Crane was not inherently cruel, but timid, someone who bent quickly under pressure from men like Knox, whose wealth cast a long shadow over him. The notice said Lila owed back fees she had already paid, and that repeated disturbances justified immediate eviction. Effective tonight. "It's not true," Lila whispered. "I've never caused trouble, never missed a payment." He said someone complained about loud fights here, but Ethan, that never happened. Ethan knew exactly who had fabricated it. Knox wasn't content with intimidation. He wanted obliteration. Silence the witnesses, punish the ones who resisted him. Ethan folded the paper calmly, though heat simmered beneath his ribs. "Where's your mother?" he asked gently. "Inside. She's worse today. The heater gave out last night." Lila hesitated, shame flickering in her eyes. "I tried to restart it, but the ignition just clicks. She's bundled in blankets, but it's so cold." Ethan motioned toward the door. "Let me take a look." The cabin's interior hit them with a wave of cold, sharp enough to sting the lungs. The single-room home was dim, lit only by a small oil lamp. Patches of frost clung to the windows. The furniture was worn, patched cushions, scratched shelves, a tiny table holding mismatched cups. Despite everything, the space was neat, arranged with love by someone trying to build safety out of nothing. On a narrow cot lay Martha Hart, Lila's mother. She was in her late 50s but looked far older, her face pale and papery, framed by steel-gray hair pulled loosely into a braid. Her cheeks were hollow, her breathing shallow, illness carving her into fragility. Lila knelt beside her, touching her forehead gently. She barely slept with the cold. I tried heating water, but the pipes froze again. Blaze settled beside the cot, lowering himself into a protective pose, warmth radiating from his sturdy frame. Ethan knelt by the ancient heater, a rusted relic from another decade. The ignition clicked weakly, stubbornly refusing to ignite. "This thing is older than me," he muttered, "but I think I can patch it." His tone was light, but his eyes were not. Hypothermia could claim someone this fragile in hours. Ethan fetched his toolkit from the truck. Lila stood nearby, wringing her hands. "You've already risked your life for me. I shouldn't ask you to do this too." "You didn't ask," Ethan said, tightening a bolt, "and I'm not doing it for Knox or for me." Lila's voice softened. "For my mom." Blaze nudged her gently, sealing the answer. Outside, wind battered the cabin, snow sneaking through cracks in the frame. Ethan noticed one hinge on the door nearly torn off, fresh damage, possibly from the storm, or from Knox's men scouting earlier. "I'll fix that too," he said. While he reinforced the door, Lila melted snow in a dented pot to make tea. Her hands trembled slightly, but her determination never wavered. Martha stirred, opening her hazel eyes, dulled but still warm. She blinked up at Ethan, confusion fading into gratitude. "You're the man from the diner," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied softly. "Here to help." "You shouldn't trouble yourself," she murmured. "Knox doesn't like people helping us." Ethan paused. Fear lived in her voice. Not new, but something long cultivated. "I'm not afraid of Knox," he said. Martha managed a faint smile. "Give it time, dear." Blaze stayed by her cot, head on his paws, ears flicking at every creak. When Ethan finished unclogging the heater and patching the intake valve, he hit the ignition. It sputtered, coughed, then roared to life with a steady hum. Warm air spilled into the room. Lila gasped, covering her mouth. "You did it." Ethan wiped soot from his hand. "It'll hold for now." She hugged him then, tentative, trembling. Ethan stiffened at first, then allowed it. Blaze's tail tapped the floor once. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what we would have done." Ethan didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the eviction notice on the table, and then to the cracked phone he had taken from the masked attackers. Knox's hostility wasn't random. The ambush, the eviction, the fabricated disturbances, it was too fast, too coordinated. Knox wasn't just retaliating, he was hiding something, something worth silencing. "We need to find out what Knox is planning," Ethan said quietly. Lila looked at him with fear and hope. "What if it's something too big? Then we don't face it alone." The heater hummed, Blaze exhaled deeply, and outside the storm thickened, whispering against the walls. Darkness in Silver Ridge was no longer just the absence of light. Something dangerous had begun to grow beneath it. Night fell over Silver Ridge like a heavy wool blanket soaked in ice. The storm had quieted, but the cold remained sharp enough to sting through Ethan Cole's gloves as he trekked north with Blaze pacing beside him. The forest loomed dark and enormous, its trees bending under the weight of fresh snow. Ethan kept his breath slow, controlled, though tension coiled inside him like a wound spring. The cracked phone from last night's ambush was now his compass, its final GPS ping marking a location deep within the abandoned mining district, a place locals avoided with superstitious conviction. The Hawthorne coal site had been dead for 20 years, shut down after a fatal cave-in claimed 3 workers. Moonless nights made its silhouette look like the ribcage of some titanic creature left to rot. Rusted towers leaned like broken limbs, conveyor belts hung torn mid-collapse, and fog crawled low across the earth with an unnatural chemical tang. Blaze moved ahead, nose low, tail rigid, catching scents that didn't belong to the forest. His thick black and tan coat bristled under the faint moonlight, muscles coiled beneath his 95-pound frame. Nearly 6 years old and in prime condition, the shepherd glanced back at Ethan with amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence and warning. Ethan gave a silent nod. Blaze pressed on. Fresh boot prints crisscrossed the snow, heavy treads, multiple pairs, recent. Ethan crouched, scanning them, feeling danger hum beneath his ribs. "We're not alone, boy," he whispered. Blaze's ears flicked. A metallic clank echoed across the ruins. Ethan flattened behind an overturned mining cart, motioning Blaze down. Voices drifted through the night, male, careless, assuming solitude. Ethan moved through the wreckage with silent precision, keeping low to the shadows of dead machinery. He reached a ridge overlooking the old drainage basin, and fury carved itself into his bones. 4 men stood beside enormous industrial tanks, dented, unlabeled, bearing faint hazardous waste codes. They wore thick jackets, industrial gloves, and the demeanor of men paid enough to ignore their consciences. One man stood out, Rowan Pierce, mid-40s, thick as a bulldozer, bald head gleaming under harsh floodlights, a jagged cheek scar catching the cold light. Once a longshoreman known for violence and brawling, now reduced to hired muscle for the highest bidder. 2 others wrestled a barrel toward the basin's edge, which fed directly into the creek that supplied drinking water to Silver Ridge. The 4th paced nervously, wiry frame twitching with uncertainty. Then, a black SUV rolled in, tires grinding ice. Harold Knox stepped out. Even in total darkness, he dressed like a man playing emperor. Dark wool coat fitted to his thick frame. Expensive leather gloves, charcoal scarf knotted perfectly. His thinning blonde hair was combed back, his pale blue eyes sharp with irritation. "What's the holdup?" Knox snapped. "These tanks need to be emptied before morning. State inspectors arrive next week, and I want this land clean before they sniff anywhere near it." Rowan stepped forward. "We're working as fast as we can. These drums—" "I'm not paying you to complain," Knox snapped. "Just finish the job." Ethan's jaw locked. The truth assembled itself with horrifying clarity. Knox was dumping chemical waste into the watershed to tank property values and force remaining families to abandon their land. Once declared contaminated, he could swoop in with a redevelopment plan and claim profits, poisoning the town for personal gain. Blaze nudged Ethan's thigh, sensing the storm inside him. Ethan forced his breathing steady. Evidence. He needed evidence. Blaze stiffened suddenly, nose pointing toward a half-collapsed storage shed. Ethan followed him inside. A wave of chemical stench hit instantly, sharp enough to sting the eyes. Blaze pawed at a sealed crate. Ethan pried it open. Inside, smaller hazmat containers, each stamped with manufacturing dates matching the timeline Knox's company publicly denied. "Good boy," Ethan whispered. Blaze wagged his tail once but immediately dropped into a defensive stance. Headlights. Another vehicle. Knox turned sharply. One of his men shouted, "Sir, someone's been here! Tracks! Fresh!" Flashlights flared. Rowan barked orders. Men scrambled. Ethan cursed silently. Blaze pressed against him, muscles trembling with controlled readiness. Knox's voice sliced the night. "Find them, now. Whoever's poking around needs a lesson." Ethan retreated into the shadows, Blaze matching his movements like an extension of his own breath. Snow crunched in the distance, men spreading out. Then Rowan's voice boomed, "Tracks head north, 2 sets, boots and dog." And Knox answered, voice dripping with cold certainty, "Then it's him! Cole, bring me his head!" Ethan felt the chill slide deeper than the winter air. Knox hadn't just reacted. He'd expected this. The entire site was a trap waiting to spring. Blaze growled softly, a warning carved from instinct. "We're leaving," Ethan whispered. "Quiet." They climbed toward the rocky incline behind the ridge. A sudden flare shot into the sky, bathing the mining ruins in violent red light. Rowan roared, "There, by the conveyor tower!" And like wolves given a scent, the hunt began. The blizzard struck with a violence that felt almost personal, as if the mountain winds themselves had chosen this night to tear Silver Ridge apart. Snow whipped sideways in white sheets, stinging any exposed skin and howling through the pines like a wounded beast. Ethan Cole fought his way through knee-deep drifts, coat flapping violently, every breath a burning ache in his lungs. Blaze ran slightly ahead, his powerful frame cutting a sharp path, ears pinned back against the storm. His breath puffed like steam from a blacksmith's forge, but he did not slow. Not when Lila's life hung in the balance. The moment the flare had lit up above the mining grounds, Ethan had known Knox would retaliate. Not later, not tomorrow, tonight. And if Knox truly intended to silence everything that could expose him, then Lila's fragile cabin and the two women inside were his first target. Thunder cracked overhead, though it wasn't thunder. Trees were snapping beneath the weight of wind and ice. The storm roared, a furious curtain of white that erased the world. Ethan's boots crunched over frozen ground as he pushed through the forest, Blaze pausing now and then to sniff and verify direction. The cabin should have been visible by now, but instead, Ethan smelled smoke. His chest clenched. A glow appeared between the pines, a trembling, flickering orange that painted the snow like spilled fire. Blaze barked sharply, urgency rising in his voice. Ethan broke into a sprint, ignoring the stabbing pain in his lower back, slamming one boot in front of the other until the trees parted. Lila's house was burning. Flames clawed upward from the back wall where accelerant had been poured. The heat rippled in waves that warped the falling snow into hissing steam. Glass shattered as the windows burst from pressure, sending shards into the drifts. The fire was growing fast, too fast for an accident. Silhouettes moved at the edge of the inferno, Knox's men. 3 of them, all wearing padded winter jackets and scarves that hid most of their faces. Ethan recognized Rowan Pierce immediately, the big man's shaved head gleaming faintly beneath his hood, scar cutting down his cheek like a jagged tear through stone. Rowan hefted a crowbar over one shoulder, posture coiled, predatory. His 2 companions were smaller, a thin, hawk-nosed man with a twitchy demeanor named Fitch, and a broader, square-jawed bruiser called Margot, whose scruffy brown beard was stiff with ice. "Finish the job!" Rowan shouted above the gale. "Knox said no survivors!" That was all Ethan needed to hear. He didn't call out, didn't warn them. Instead, he sprinted straight for the burning front porch. Blaze tore after him, barking in furious bursts. Inside the cabin, Ethan could hear the muffled cries, Lila's voice panicked and straining. The front door was jammed, the wood warped by heat. Ethan hurled himself at it, shoulder first. The impact rattled every bone in his body. Pui hit it again. And again. On the 4th strike, the top hinge snapped, and the door slammed inward with a choking cough of smoke. "Lila!" Ethan yelled. Lila stood in the haze, her face streaked with soot, coughing as she tried to pull her unconscious mother toward the entrance. Her strawberry blonde hair clung damply to her cheeks, eyes red, breath sharp with desperation. "Ethan, she collapsed. I couldn't—" "We're getting her out," Ethan said, his voice steady, though the room rumbled with collapsing beams. He swept Martha into his arms. She was feather-light from illness, her gray braid brushing his arm. Blaze pressed close to Lila, guiding her out while Ethan carried Martha through the swirling firelight. Outside, the cold hit them like a wall. The burning cabin behind cast a hellish red glow over the snow, painting the blizzard in blood-colored light. Ethan lowered Martha beside a tree stump shielded from direct flames. Lila crouched beside her mother, cradling her face. Then Rowan's voice boomed through the roar of wind. "Well, well! The old SWAT dog shows teeth again!" Rowan approached with the crowbar raised, his hulking figure cutting a monstrous outline against the fire. His men fanned out, forming a semicircle around Ethan and Lila. Blaze stood in front of Ethan, growl grinding from deep in his chest. "You should have stayed out of this," Rowan snarled. "Knox offered you a fair chance. Walk away. But now look what you cost us." "You did this," Ethan said coldly. "You set fire to a sick woman's home." Rowan shrugged. "Property clears faster this way." That was the moment something inside Ethan snapped, not from anger, but from clarity. Men like Rowan didn't fear words, they feared consequence. "Blaze," Ethan said softly. The shepherd tensed. Rowan lunged. Ethan moved first. His training, years dormant, roared back like muscle memory sharpened to a blade. Ethan sidestepped Rowan's swing, grabbing the crowbar shaft with one hand while using Rowan's own momentum to twist him sideways. Rowan stumbled, but recovered quickly, swinging again. Sparks flew as metal hit frozen earth. Fitch charged at Ethan from the right, brandishing a knife. Blaze intercepted, launching his powerful frame toward the attacker. The shepherd struck Fitch squarely in the ribs, knocking the air out of him. The blade flew from Fitch's hand, skidding across ice. Blaze pinned him, teeth bared inches from Fitch's throat, his growl vibrating like thunder. Margot tried to flank Ethan from behind, swinging a broken fence post. Blaze saw him first. He broke off Fitch, spinning with startling precision, jaws clamping onto Margot's wrist. Margot screamed, dropped the weapon, and staggered back as Blaze forced him onto the snow. Rowan came at Ethan again with a roar. Ethan ducked the swing, jabbed Rowan's ribs with a tight, controlled strike, then hooked Rowan's leg. The big man dropped onto one knee. Snow exploding beneath him. Ethan seized Rowan's coat collar and slammed him backward into the snow, pinning him with a forearm. "You're done," Ethan growled. Rowan spat blood. "Knox won't let—" A spotlight flashed through the whiteout, then another, and sirens, multiple, cut through the night. Red and blue lights broke through the blizzard, casting long shadows across the burning wreck. Vehicles lumbered into the clearing, black SUVs and marked law enforcement transports fighting the storm. Doors burst open and federal agents rushed out, winter gear glinting under the spinning lights. A tall woman led them, Federal Agent Donna Rourke, mid-40s, strong jaw, dark brown hair braided tight against her collar. Her eyes were sharp, hardened by years of chasing men who thought themselves untouchable. Snow dusted her long navy parka, and her gloved hand rested on a holstered sidearm as she surveyed the chaos. "Cole!" she shouted over the storm. "We got your evidence! Stand down, we're taking it from here!" Rows of agents flooded the site, subduing the attackers swiftly. Rowan was yanked from under Ethan and cuffed, still snarling. Fitch and Margot were dragged into custody, Blaze watching with alert satisfaction. Agent Rourke approached Ethan, breath clouding the air. "You did the right thing sending the files when you did. Knox is already in custody. These men are going away for a long time." Ethan nodded once, relief mixing with battle-worn exhaustion. Blaze pressed against his side, shivering slightly from the cold and adrenaline. Lila rushed toward Ethan, tears streaking dirty lines down her cheeks. She threw her arms around him, trembling. Ethan held her for a moment, steady and strong. Behind them, Martha stirred weakly, blinking at the lights. She was alive, safe. The fire raged behind them, but the night, finally, was turning. Morning crept over Silver Ridge with a gentleness the town had not seen in weeks. The blizzard had finally exhausted itself, leaving behind a vast, untouched blanket of snow that shimmered like crushed diamonds beneath the early orange glow. Pines bent under frost's heavy hand, and the air carried that crisp purity found only after chaos, when nature pauses, as if inhaling before granting the world another chance. Ethan Cole stood on the hill overlooking the town, boots half buried in snow, frost clinging to the ends of his graying beard. His face, weathered, lined, forged by years of service and haunted memory, looked softer in the dawn. Still stern, yes, but lighter, as though some ancient burden had finally loosened its grip. Blaze sat pressed against his leg, tail sweeping lazy arcs across the snow, breath puffing in warm clouds. The shepherd's thick winter coat gleamed as sunrise painted him gold, black and tan, all at once. Below them, Silver Ridge stirred cautiously back to life. Porch lights flickered on, snow shovels scraped, chimneys released gentle spirals of smoke. A town long suffocated beneath Knox's shadow now exhaled freely. Ethan rested a hand on Blaze's neck. "Looks different today, doesn't it?" Blaze huffed, the sound carrying the weight of agreement. They descended the hill along a narrow, packed trail. Passing the old pine diner, Ethan caught sight of Margaret inside. Short, stout, her warm brown skin glowing in the lamplight as she rearranged mugs beneath the still-broken window, now patched with plywood. Her slate-gray curls were piled messily atop her head, and when she saw Ethan, her entire face brightened. She waved, gratitude radiating through the frosted glass. He nodded back. Recognition was enough. A few paces later, Sheriff Dawes approached. The new interim sheriff, tall, broad-shouldered, early 40s with calm eyes and a trimmed beard, walked with a steadiness that Silver Ridge desperately needed. Unlike his predecessor, Dawes exuded quiet authority instead of fear. "Cole," he greeted warmly, offering a gloved handshake. "Federal agents briefed us. Knox and his boy are being transferred. Arson, environmental crimes, conspiracy, assault, you name it." Ethan shook his head. "Men like him always think they're untouchable." Dawes smirked. "Guess you proved otherwise." Blaze sniffed Dawes's boots, tail wagging. Dawes knelt, scratching Blaze's head affectionately. "And you, soldier, have a ceremony today," Blaze barked proudly. Ethan arched an eyebrow. Dawes grinned. "Don't pretend you didn't know. Half the town planned it." Ethan huffed. Ceremonies aren't my thing. It's for Blaze, Dawes reminded. Blaze puffed his chest as though confirming the truth. The town square buzzed with gathered families, bundled children, federal agents leaning against vehicles with amused expressions. Snow had been cleared into a neat circle where a simple stage waited. Agent Dana Rourke approached, strong jaw, dark braid, hazel eyes sharp even in peace. Today, the tension in her shoulders had eased. You look miserable, she teased. Ethan crossed his arms. Crowds aren't my preference. Acknowledgement matters, she countered, especially for what you did here. Blaze nudged Ethan's knee in agreement. Rourke allowed a small smile. Silver Ridge is damn lucky you retired in these mountains. Then Lila appeared, wrapped in a deep green winter coat, strawberry blonde hair tucked beneath a wool hat, her cheeks pink from cold and hope. She crossed the snow toward Ethan. A tired smile, soft but bright, bloomed across her face. Beside her walked Martha, steady on her cane, steel gray braid neat against her shoulder. Her eyes carried warmth again, not the hollow desperation of days before. Good morning, Lila said breathlessly. Blaze trotted to her, lifting his head for ear scratches. Lila obliged, laughing softly. Ready to be the star hero? Blaze rumbled happily, rolling onto his side in the snow. Ethan shook his head with rare amusement. He's impossible when people fuss over him. He earned it, Martha said firmly. She met Ethan's eyes with unwavering gratitude. And so did you. Dawes stepped onto the stage, lifting a microphone. Silver Ridge, he called, voice echoing across the frosted square. Thank you for gathering. We've survived a winter darker than any we expected. But today, we begin again. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. And today, we honor those who protected us. He pointed toward Blaze. Blaze, K9 of Silver Ridge, approach! Blaze rose tall and proud, chest lifted like a veteran soldier. Ethan guided him forward. Dawes placed a medal around Blaze's neck, a shimmering silver emblem engraved with Courage, K9, Silver Ridge. Cheers erupted. Children whooped and clapped. An older man whistled triumphantly. Blaze barked, triumphant and joyful. Lila wiped a tear, smiling at Ethan. He looks so handsome. He always does, Ethan murmured. After the ceremony, Dawes led Ethan, Lila, and Martha beyond the square to a trail lined with frost-heavy pines. At the end of it, nestled into the slope, stood a restored cabin, fresh beams, a stone chimney releasing warm smoke, porch steps sturdy and new. Lila gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Martha's eyes filled instantly with tears. This is, Lila began. A community donation, Dawes said. Labor, materials, everything. Folks here wanted to help rebuild what was taken from you. Blaze bounded up the steps, scratching the door as though staking the claim for them. Lila hugged her mother tightly. Martha whispered, Bless this town. Ethan watched them quietly, a warmth rising through him he hadn't felt in years. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan and Blaze climbed back to the hill overlooking Silver Ridge. Silence wrapped around them, soft and clean. Blaze sat beside him, leaning gently into Ethan's leg. We've seen a lot, Ethan murmured. More than we wanted. Blaze looked up with steady, loyal eyes. But justice, Ethan said softly. Justice doesn't age. Blaze released a resonant bark across the snowy expanse. A vow, a promise, a companion's eternal agreement. Sunrise bathed Silver Ridge in gold, and together they watched the town wake to its new beginning. In the end, it felt as if something greater had been watching over Silver Ridge, a quiet miracle woven through snow and fire, guiding wounded hearts toward safety and justice. Some would call it fate, others resilience, but those who lived it knew that sometimes God sends help in the form of ordinary people, and even a loyal dog, to remind us that light can rise from the deepest winter. If this story moved you or made you think about the everyday battles we all face, share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment, tell us your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so more stories of courage and grace can find their way to you. If you believe that God is still watching over the innocent and that justice will always prevail, type Amen in the comments below. God bless you all and thank you for watching.